Tonight on The ReidOut.
You're entitled to believe and trust advice of counsel. You had one of the leading constitutional scholars in the United States, John Eastman, say to President Trump, this is a protocol that you can follow. It's legal. That eliminates criminal intent.
Trump's attorney just last month saying that Trump cannot be held responsible for his alleged crimes because he was only listening to the advice of lawyers and learned constitutional scholars. This weekend, Trump himself blew that argument out of the water, saying it was all his idea. Also tonight, new reporting on the alleged nexus of Justice Brett Kavanaugh and dark money millionaires in Alabama's open defiance of court rulings on unfairly drawn legislative maps. Plus, have Republicans no shame? Lauren Boebert's public groping is just the latest in a string of bad behavior by the party that pretends to care about family values. But we begin tonight with what appears to be one of the hardest jobs in America, being one of Donald Trump's lawyers. First, you have to worry about whether you will ever be paid by the man notoriously known to skip out on paying his bills, including to his very own lawyers. Just ask Rudy Giuliani. And speaking of Giuliani, there is the second worry, which is that working for Trump could put you in legal and professional jeopardy, or at a minimum could make you a witness, like another Trump lawyer, Evan Corcoran. And then there was the third worry, how to mount a winning defense for the twice impeached, 4 times indicted former president who has a penchant for suddenly demolishing his lawyer strategies by making ill-advised confessions. For example, in the classified documents case, Trump's legal team sent out a letter to Congress in April claiming they have seen absolutely no indication that Trump knowingly possessed any of the marked documents, and that, in fact, any classified documents that were sent to Mar-a-Lago were due to mistakes by White House staff and the General Services Administration. Just 2 little weeks later, Trump not only undercut that possible defense, but he did it on live TV.
I had every right to under the Presidential Records Act. You have the Presidential Records Act. I was there and I took what I took and it gets declassified. Just so you understand, I had every right to do it. I didn't make a secret of it.
And in the other federal case brought by the special counsel involving Trump's attempts to try to overturn the 2020 election, Trump's lead attorney, John Lauro, tried to set the stage to point the blame at Trump's election lawyers, at the time claiming that Trump was just following their advice. Now, whether or not that defense strategy would have actually worked in court, we may never know, because over the weekend, Trump turned to his lawyers and said, hold my beer.
You called some of your outside lawyers. You said they had crazy theories. Why were you listening to them? Were you listening to them because they were telling you what you wanted to hear?
You know who I listened to myself? I saw what happened. I watched that election, and I thought the election was over at 10 o'clock in the evening.
Were you calling the shots, though, Mr. President, ultimately?
As to whether or not I believed it was rigged, oh, sure. It was my decision.
Well, what also must be causing his lawyers a lot of heartburn is the fact that Trump has claimed numerous times in the past few weeks that he is ready and willing to testify under oath during his trials. But it's okay, Trump lawyers. There's nothing to worry about. Let's not forget what Trump claimed back in 2015.
I know more about courts than any human being on earth.
Okay. Joining me now is Catherine Christian, former Manhattan Assistant District Attorney, and Joyce Vance, former U.S. Attorney at the University of Alabama Law Professor and MSNBC legal analyst. Y'all are so accomplished. It's so hard for me to do your intros. I have to talk to you, Catherine Christian, first. As a prosecutor, how much would you have given to have the defendant in front of you simply confess to all the crimes on television? Because that can be used against him in court, right? Those interviews.
Oh, yeah. This is a gift to the prosecutors. As his lawyers are crying, the prosecutors are guaranteed there's a member of each team for indictments who are culling all of his interviews on radio, on TV, his post things on social media, and going, yippee. This is a continuation of his confessions tour. He contradicts his prior statements. He contradicts his lawyers constantly. So even if he doesn't testify at trial, and I think he won't, the prosecutors will play these statements during their direct testimony. They can do this during the direct case.
And can they, because he's given public interviews, can they subpoena him? They can't make him testify.
No,
it's up to him.
He has an absolute right to remain silent.
Okay. Well, he ain't using it. Let's just say that.
He's now speaking, so they can use this against him.
They can just use it against him. And Joyce, but wait, there's more. Let me just play, because we've played this before, but I just want to give you and the audience just the gravity of the amount of times he keeps confessing to the things he is accused of in court. Roll them.
If you're the president of the United States, you can declassify just by saying it's declassified, even by thinking about it, because you're sending it to Mar-a-Lago or to wherever you're sending it.
In other words, whatever documents a president decides to take with him, he has the absolute right to do so. That's the law, and it couldn't be more clear. As president, you have every right to have these documents, personal belongings, and whatever else there is. Many people have asked me why I had these boxes. Why did you want them? The answer, in addition to having every right under the Presidential Records Act, is that these boxes were containing all types of personal belongings, many, many things, shirts and shoes and everything. I hadn't had a chance to go through all the boxes. It's a long, tedious job. It takes a long time, which I was prepared to do, but I have a very busy life. I've had a very busy life.
You know, there is a risk, I think, in a lot of the media of giving Trump more credit for intelligence than he probably deserves based on his just actual behavior. But at the risk of playing that game, is there a world, Joyce, in which doing this helps him in the sense that it poisons the jury pool because it convinces a certain set of voters that somehow the Presidential Records Act does apply, and that even if he, according to this latest ABC News headline, wrote to-do lists on the classified documents, the things are marked classified, he uses them to doodle to-do lists and literally, you know, sort of destroys the documents by doing that. But even if he's doing something that outrageous, that then there are at least some jurors who have heard him say this enough times that that jury pool is then poisoned.
So I think you're exactly right that that's what he's trying to do. When the evidence is this strong against you, you've got to try to poison the jury pool, I guess, if you're Trump, thinking the way that he does. But here's the reality that he will face. During voir dire, the lawyers will have the opportunity to talk with potential jurors. Most jurors are going to have heard something about this case, and some of them will know a great deal. And the commitment that the lawyers will look for and that the judge will enforce is that those jurors can set aside everything that they've heard outside of the courtroom and decide the case based solely on the evidence and the law as the judge instructs them on it. And although I think sometimes people are incredible and don't believe that that actually happens, it does in courtrooms. And we don't need to look any further than Paul Manafort's trial, where one of the jurors was a woman who said she was a strong Trump supporter. Yeah. But she listened to the evidence in that trial. Manafort was guilty, and she voted to convict.
And the same thing happened, you know, in the E. Jean Carroll case. There were, I think, one or two lawyers who people, when they heard about sort of what happened in voir dire, were like, well, there's a couple of real Trumpies in there. But in the end, they said they looked at the evidence. Would one of the things that the prosecutor do in the closing or during the trial is just explain the Presidential Records Act? Will they get the opportunity to debunk that claim? Because he is injecting that into the sort of atmosphere.
They should be able to, or the judge will instruct the jury. Now, this is the classified documents judge is different than the January 6th judge.
Good point. Good point.
Because he's just wrong on the law. That is just not the law. He can keep his shirts and his golf shirts, sure, but he can't keep classified documents. The law is clear that the official documents have to go to the National Archives. His personal belongings can go to him.
No one wants his shirts. I mean, Joyce, I mean, the thing about it is Donald Trump, all the way back to 2015 and 2016, made the argument that Hillary Clinton should be in prison because among the personal records on her personal server were things with a C on them that were incidentally part of the stuff that was in her personal server. They've made the argument that you needed to lock her up. There have been military people, high military officials who've been prosecuted for taking classified documents, former government officials. It is just not the case that anyone gets away with this. So it's wild that he could even try to do it. But I want to go to one of his other sort of claims here. He's also trying to inject into the atmosphere that it was really Nancy Pelosi's fault that January 6th happened. He said in the Meet the Press interview that he ordered tens of thousands of troops, a claim that is just patently false. In fact, his own former defense secretary, acting defense secretary, gave interviews on the record saying, nope, there was never an ask for that. Could a claim like that, Donald Trump lying and trying to cast blame on Speaker Pelosi, is that something that might be at issue in the January 6th case? Because he's also lying about that stuff.
So I think to Catherine's point earlier, someplace there are a couple of lawyers on each of these trial teams who are taking meticulous notes every time Trump does an interview. They're probably putting together video clips. And at some point, these juries will be able to compare Trump's statements, these lies that he's telling in public, to what the truth is. That might be witness testimony. Or in the Mar-a-Lago case, I think it's very likely that people who advise Trump about the rules for handling classified documents will testify, and the jury will see the classified documents with their clear markings, and then they'll hear Trump saying, you know, crazy talk about the Presidential Records Act. So, yes, these public interviews that he's giving are ill-advised, to say the least, and prosecutors will end up hanging him with his own words.